Is there water? Oh, great. Well, hello, everybody. I was wondering, before I even begin, who in the room feels that they have seen unidentified aerial phenomenon, or who have even had a contact experience? You want to raise your hand? So, a lot of convincing out here. And who here has not had an experience and doesn't even believe in this kind of thing, but is open-minded to learn? Oh, yay, good. You always want to know who your audience is, right? I'll be referring to my notes here because I don't have the Richard Dolan, I remember everything chip upgrade in my head today. So I'll be referring to my notes, and that way we'll stay on script and get through a lot of material that I've prepared for everyone here today. As Victor said, I'm a two-time Emmy Award-winning director, and that gives me the opportunity to research and shoot a new possible television series, which I'll show a clip from a little bit later, about the phenomena about implants and the human challenge that we have for those people who claim to have had a contact or abduction experience. And while this topic is hugely complex and psychologically profound, my hope was to find scientific evidence offering tangible proof of an extraterrestrial presence amongst us. There's no doubt in my mind that the subject transcends the three dimensions we can know through our five senses. But that said, there are millions of people who claim to have had contact or possibly even been abducted who want hard answers to what they've undergone. The woman who I will be speaking about in this presentation, one of them anyway, has collaborated with me in the research of an unidentified object that suddenly appeared beneath the skin of her arm as a child. This outstanding characteristic is that this 24-year-old implant, meaning from the age of 10 it was implanted and we surgically removed it on camera 24 years later. So the interesting thing or anomalous thing about it is that it manifested magnetic properties. And this is where my involvement with Natalie's implant begins, but first, a little perspective of how I came to this. So, as a child, like probably all of you out here, I looked up to the stars wondering, are we alone? And is it possible that there's something more, or are we just uniquely placed here and that's it, folks? I found that hard to believe. So as a young person, I read the book Chariots of the Gods. That was my first introduction of any literature that offered a hint that made sense to my young intellect, that yes, just possibly, the gods were visitors. And as you probably know, last year was the 50th anniversary of that book. 50 years. My pursuit of truth led me to a place called the Valley of Gods, India. As a truth seeker, I wanted to know more, and in the high Himalayas, I met a guru, and I actually came and went for 24 years, but I lived in India for 9 of those coming and going. I remember sitting in the Himalayas with my guru, and one of the first interactions I had when I met him, I was looking at him and I said, you know, I always wanted to know, is there life out there? And he stared off into space for what seemed like an eternity, and then he looked back at me, sitting on the ground before him, and he said, there's so much in this universe, not only life out there, but on multiple dimensions. I said, multiple dimensions? You know, I asked the question all doe-eyed and like, really? And this was long before we were all talking about this, which is, you know, everyone's using the buzzword holographic reality and matrix, and it's kind of common lingo now. But at that time, nobody talked like that. And he responded by saying, you don't even grasp life on Earth in 3 dimensions. How could I possibly know 4, 5, 6 to 11? Unless I meditated and merged my individual consciousness with universal source. So that was my practice from the age of 19 years old until today. Here's a fuzzy moment from the Emmy Awards. And for all you people who say, where's the hard evidence? Why do people always take photographs of fuzzy UFOs? I can't even get a photograph at the Emmy Awards that's not fuzzy, so get in line. So now, working in TV, I get to meet and work on projects that are very fascinating, and this is where I came to meet Natalie, at a conference here in Toronto, in fact. So Natalie, as a 9 or 10-year-old little girl, recalls waking up in the middle of the night from a sharp pain in her arm. There was a flash of light and a sharp, sudden pain. She was frightened. She described being almost paralyzed. She couldn't move. And Natalie always had this very suspicious feeling about the bump that showed up under her skin and showed up the very next morning, in fact, after she awoke. She showed her mother, and they didn't know what it was. So the shock of her childhood, in her childhood, of waking from a sudden jolt in her arm was just one aspect, but there was something more. Natalie shared that, along with her mother and brother, she's encountered UFO sightings periodically over the years. Equally of interest, when she was telling me her story, and this is where my ears perked up, she said that her father was a civilian contractor leading a top-secret military project during her childhood. So then I thought, this is interesting, and let's pursue this a little bit more. So I asked Natalie, do you recall any of the details from your childhood experience other than waking up with a sharp pain? She said that she couldn't, and that it was blocked from her memory. So then I told Natalie about my project to pursue the abduction and implant phenomena, and asked if she was willing to undergo hypnosis to learn more and share that with us on camera, and she agreed. So my goal was to find out what this material is made of, and what unusual or possibly strange characteristics it might exhibit. And I'd like to play for you now 3 minutes of a kind of teaser reel that we prepared for the networks and which is in consideration presently for a project. This will summarize the story a little bit, and I'll go a little bit more into the details of what we found in 3 minutes from now.
Millions of people claim to have been abducted by aliens. In North America alone, that represents 4% of the population, or 13 million people, more than everyone living in New York City.
I want to not be afraid.
I don't think they wanted me. I think they wanted my daughter.
This is a much more widespread phenomenon than people are realizing.
While many of them are written off as being delusional, too many of these people share similar stories that cannot simply be dismissed or trivialized as fantasy.
Being observed and tested.
I want to tell you.
It's a biological experiment.
They need DNA.
Hypnotic regression has been used with many victims to unlock their abduction episode.
The question is this physical, or is this a dream state, or is this some kind of telepathic state, or some kind of event that occurs inside human consciousness or another dimension of reality?
Is there an ongoing alien presence interacting with humans?
I woke up in the morning. I had the shooting pain in my arm. There was no visible scar. There was no bruising or any evidence where this had come from.
I think some of them are being given implants. Some of them are marked in one way or another.
I remember having a rough night's sleep, and I woke up, and I remember taking off my undershirt and looking on my chest, and there were 2 triangles on my chest. It's as if a brand had been put on me.
So it feels pretty hard, and the magnets will stick to this, so it's obviously a metallic foreign body of some sort.
I felt the pull.
I don't think I can live the rest of my life without knowing what this is. I want to know what it is and to possibly find out how it got in my arm in the first place.
A leading university analyzed the sample. What they found surprised even them.
We took the pathology sample, sectioned it, and examined those sections under the microscope. The sample was also examined using an electron microscope. The pathology looking at the samples showed that it was a fibrous capsule surrounding what appeared to be a bone fragment. There was a small amount of ingrowth of blood vessels.
I think something that's odd is that this still has blood going to it.
Cysts are not magnetic. Growths, they don't react to magnet and copper.
No guesses as to why it had any magnetic properties. Definitely a mystery.
Could this be an alien implant? What is the alien agenda? And are we part of their human harvest?
We are not alone. We are not alone.
So that gives you a little sense. That gives you a little sense as to what we were doing together. And as you can see, Natalie's implant beneath the skin surface, and that magnets, neodymium magnets, would stick to it, and you could literally feel the pull to that. And as you saw in the teaser, Leslie Mitchell-Clark was our hypnotherapist, and for anybody out there who wants some kind of memory regressed and to unfold what's locked deep inside, I can honestly say Leslie Mitchell-Clark is top of the top. Now, during the hypnotic regression, Natalie was brought back to a moment when she was 9 or 10 years old, lying in bed, and she remembered beings surrounding her but couldn't identify any faces. She sensed being lifted up into a bright light, and that was the point in the video where she was saying, "No, no, no." The first thing Natalie recounted after the hypnotic regression was a recurring dream from a very young age about having a baby or losing a baby. She was uncertain, other than it was a recurring dream that she related immediately coming out of the regression. She was uncertain, other than it was recurring, and said, like, as soon as that implant went in my arm, I sat up straight, and it was like bam, she just woke up from the pain. She told us after the regression that she recalled a scene with dark gray metal walls and a white sheet, or perhaps white uniforms. She felt like they, whomever they are, came for something. It's a mystery, and Natalie is looking for answers to this day. What is this implanted object? What's it made of? And why does it attract magnets? Is it chemical? Is it biological or metallic? And if so, is there any technology to it, and what might that be? Also, are there any isotopes or rare metals that may suggest it has origins beyond our world? In this x-ray that we took for the doctor before he did the surgery, you can see circled a little mass, and that's what was removed surgically. And for all you people who question, why don't we see more of this? Why don't more people have their so-called implants removed and operated on? You just can't do that. I am friends with 3 doctors here in Toronto, and when they all heard that this has something to do with something other than, a tumor of some kind, they just, at arm's length, held me away and said they were not interested. So if it wasn't for having a childhood friend in Montreal who was willing to go on camera and do this, I couldn't be standing here today presenting this. So Dr. Ari Benchetrit is the person on August 26th who did the surgery, and when he put the magnet to it, he said, yeah, I can definitely feel the magnetism to this. He said it's obviously a foreign metallic object. That was his conclusion based on his experience as a surgeon. So we prepped Natalie for surgery, and I sort of had a picture in my mind. You all remember Dr. Roger Lear and all the videos he's done on YouTube and in documentaries, and how he would go in for the surgery and chase this thing through the person's body because it was like running for its dear life. that was my mindset when we went into this. And the surgery literally took 7 minutes. In and out, we were done. So I thought, oh, that's disappointing. But I try and keep an open mind with all of this. Whenever there's phenomena or anything, it's like, okay, let's see where this goes. I'm not quick to judge and be the first one out of the gate to say, hoax, no, liar. It's like, okay, let's just see where this goes. I think we need more of that. So as he said, it looks synthetic. It doesn't look like something that was just random, like a shard or a piece of shrapnel or anything like that. And he commented over and over again that it was very thick and sticky and fibrous. And he said, look, it'll be interesting to see what you guys come up with when you go to the lab. So what we had was a 5 by 2 millimeter object that was like 2 tiny balls joined in fibrous skin. Now, once we removed it from Natalie's arm, neither her arm nor this piece of material that we removed from it exhibited any magnetic properties. So we went to the Department of Chemical Engineering and also Biomedical Engineering at McMaster University. To prepare the implant for analysis, we had to split it in half and then subdivide it into very fine 3-micron thin pieces. Now, a human hair is about 5 microns, so 3 microns is pretty slim. As we were cutting through the implant, 6 times the blade broke. Now, this is a blade that's made for very, very hard metals that they usually analyze in that lab. And when the blade broke that many times, the doctor looked at me and he was hugely surprised. I was very excited because I thought, okay, we've got something incredibly cool here if it could break his blades not once but 6 times. And then we surrounded the fibrous material that came from Natalie's arm in paraffin for the purpose of holding it in place while we cut the material. And we visited 2 different departments. One was to examine the pathology of the tissues, and the other was to analyze and determine the material and elemental composition using SEM and EDS, or scanning electron microscopy. I can never say microscopy. And X-rays. This is what we learned. Primarily, the materials that we came up with in the lab were calcium, carbon, oxygen, phosphorus, and in lesser amounts, sulfur, magnesium, and nitrogen. In short, ladies and gentlemen, what we're looking at is bone and cartilage. There were no significant metals or any other rare elements found. The university technician suggested to me that it's very possible that as a child she was playing, banged her arm, and a little bone fragment got chipped away, around which the body will treat it as a foreign object, surround it with cartilage and collagen and other things, and it happens a lot to little kids. So that said, there are 2 anomalies of interest. Though we learned that the material is bone and cartilage, the anomaly remains that blood vessels still actively fed the tissue after all these years. And that was highly unusual, commented the pathologist Dr. Ben Muirhead from the Department of Biomedical Engineering. Now, on camera, he said it was highly unusual. Off camera, when I said, well, highly unusual, but have you ever seen it before? He said, never heard of that before. So that was very interesting. So then I asked the doctor, how is the response to magnetism explained and the reaction of heat when a piece of copper was placed over the object? Why would bone have these reactions? And Dr. Moorhead said, again, bone would not react in this way. I have no plausible explanation for this phenomenon. He says, I've searched through all the literature after you left and have found no other mention of a magnetic fibrous capsule or indeed any magnetic biological tissues whatsoever. So he said, I'm sorry, I just don't have a better answer for you. And he added, the fact that there was blood flow to that piece of tissue after 24 years of being encased, he said, is highly unusual. So on the topic of magnetism, the co-director at the School of Biomedical Engineering, Dr. Noseworthy, commented This can't be normal bone or cartilage, as both are diamagnetic and weakly repel magnetic fields. He also couldn't understand how this could only be bone and collagen. So we went to another laboratory at the university, and we looked at X-ray fluorescence and X-ray diffraction analysis. And what you see on screen is what came up, and I won't read them all to you, but I'll tell you a little bit what Dr. Fahad said to us. And basically, these two techniques of XRF and XRD provide qualitative and quantitative material characterization for detection and analysis for metals and alloys in mining and geology. And they can define the materials, but not the object being examined. So for example, I could take my watch off, put it in the machine, and they could tell you how much brass, how much copper, how much gold is in there for parts per million, but they couldn't tell me it was a watch. So I'm sitting with Dr. Fahad, and he says to us, I don't have wide experience in measuring different types of tissues. I've only measured skin, and in skin, it's primarily iron and chromium that are the trace metals I measure. So based on this, it doesn't look like the typical skin of a live human being. Left me there scratching my head, because for obvious reasons. And based on my experience, he said, that's all I can say about the sample. The XRF technique doesn't lend itself to identifying where a sample came from or what it is. It can just measure what metals are in it. So then I said to him, so you don't believe that this is typical of skin? And he's a skin specialist, by the way, as mentioned, and he overheard us talking about taking it from her arm. So he already knew, spoiler alert, it's skin. So he already knew that that's what we're looking at. So he was particularly attentive because that's his specialty. It wasn't some rare metal or something else. So when I said to him, so you don't believe this is typical of skin? He said, of a live human being, no. So then I asked the obvious, so could it be the skin of a dead human being? Would it change basically the elemental composition? Dr. Farhad said, no, it shouldn't. Not that I can think of. From the biology, I know there shouldn't be any change between a live or dead human being in terms of trace minerals. So he said the XRF technique, however, can only measure trace minerals within a sample and cannot tell me what the sample itself is or where it comes from. So then I said to him, do you believe that this is even skin? And he said, I cannot say comprehensively, but based on the skin samples I have measured, this spectrum does not look like it is typical of skin. It measures metals. Whether what those metals are or the molecules in the metals are technology, I can't say. What does that mean? So 2 anomalies remain unexplained, but there's still more. The question I left the universities with was, why would there be a robust network of capillaries going into bone if the bone is a dead bone chip that's been there for 24 years? And more outstandingly, how did it attract magnets to it? Because skin and bone do not attract magnets. So further testing has to be done. And another question people have is, why don't you go to a lab? Every time you go to a lab, every single test we're looking at about $5,000. So there's lots of testing that we can all do, but not everyone wants to reach into their pocket and shell out $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to do a few tests just to find out what's going on. 3 months later, a new anomaly appears. So we have the slides that were used for analysis. They had the 3-micron thin material. It was glued between 2 slides. And 3 months later, a friend of mine said, Sid, did you check these samples for fluorescence? And I said, why would I do that? And he said, well, because sometimes these phenomena are shining in the dark if you use a UVA or ultraviolet light. And I said to him, hey, if I smile in front of a black light, my teeth will light up. So what is it we're going to learn? And he said, just shut up and do it. So Inquiring minds can be so difficult. So I opened up the slides. The slides are in this plastic box right here. They are wrapped in tissue paper and padded on the sides, so there's not a lot of wiggle room, as you can hear. When I unwrapped the slides, of which there were 4, on 2 of the 4 slides, there was something. Now, I'm open-minded enough to think perhaps in the handling of them, maybe I polluted them in some way or contaminated them in some way. So as you can see, there's a teardrop shape object on the slide. And on the next one, there's something called splatter shape. Now, where do I get these names? I'm with probably the leading physicist in the United States whose specialty is motion. If it's air, water, or anything that moves, he pretty much has the scientific explanation for it. I showed him these 2 images, to which he said right away, "Oh, obviously, Sid, I see these every day. One's teardrop shape and the other's a splatter shape." I said, "Great, how are they made?" He said, "Well, as teardrops suggest, it's something that's dripping or dropping, which is why it has that narrow-looking tail. And the splatter shape is like when you take your paintbrush and you sort of try and dry it by," he said, "the drops come out, they hit the surface, and they get flat on top and rounded on the sides. That's splatter shape." So then I said, "How could you explain, being the specialist that you are, those 2 very distinctly different shapes that are wrapped in tissue paper in a box like this? What would create those 2 different shapes?" He looked at me for 2 seconds, and he said, "Could you pass the mustard?" So we were eating dinner. So he had no answer to this, and he didn't want to go anywhere where I was hoping to go. Here's more images in close-up, and then when I opened them up months later, again, there were more of them. The dark brown image there is the actual piece of material that was removed from the arm that I just put on there for contrast. But I picked up a couple of these and dropped them back on the glass, and there was what you would expect glass hitting glass that was very light, that kind of sound. So whether it's silicon, crystal, glass, or some hard plastic, I have no clue because I haven't yet had them analyzed. And maybe this is just some kind of contamination from the tissue paper, but why would it be creating those shapes which imply that motion was involved? So what could this be? To this day, I don't know, and if there are any scientists who have access to labs, I would love to give you a sample to have analyzed. Now we go to Norway. This phenomena is around the world. I have a friend, her name is Kate, and Kate, from a very young age, has had direct contact experiences. Kate, I should add, because she's had contacts from the crib, and she draws her experiences, and here she's crawling out of her attic window onto the roof waiting for them. And she even says that sometimes she can go through the walls when they show up. And even as an adult, she tells me that she's had medical procedures with different types of technology that most of us would say is invasive, but if you think of going to the dentist and having a dentist drill your teeth, it feels highly invasive in the moment, but afterwards, you know it's for your well-being and better health. One thing we should know about Kate is Kate is not an educated person, and I'm mentioning this because I want to reference something a little bit later. After grade school, rather than go to high school, she just decided she wanted to work. You know, up in the fjords in Norway, nobody's forcing you to go to work. And she became a carpenter and has worked as a carpenter ever since. Kate also exhibits magnetism. After a talk that we had together, I told her to go out and buy some neodymium magnets, which she did. She sent me this picture of them stuck to her chest. She also sent me x-rays after I requested she have some x-rays done, and we'll show those in a minute. But first, the moment that she starts putting the magnets on her body, we did in a Skype call for Earth Mystery News, and I'd like to play those 3 minutes for you right here and now. When we last spoke, just a couple of weeks ago, you told me that you had some implants in your body, in your neck, in your back, and other places, I recommended that you go and take some little neodymium magnets and place them there, and now you just got them today, and you're telling me they stick to 5 places in your body?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
The first one I was trying on was the one that I was thinking about. I can feel it. It feels like a three-corner shaped small thing.
Yes. So show me the size magnet that you have. You have one of those little neodymium magnets.
Yep.
And now this is going to show me how thick it is. And turn it the other way. All right. So now this, where did you find that it sticks to your body?
I will try to put it and just find it. Because if there is a lot of tissue between, it will not stick that well.
So
I was trying other places around here and then it wouldn't stick.
Now, what does the implant feel like to you? When you're touching it with your finger, what does it feel like to touch?
It feels like this one is feeling like a three-cornered bump.
A three-cornered bump.
But I can put it here.
Yeah. You have an implant in your nose. And it's sticking to your nose.
Yes. I also can put it on that side, and will be just the same.
There's one that sticks, and you've never had nose surgery?
No. But I know that I had one after my experiences.
While you were having an abduction experience, you had some kind of surgery from the extraterrestrial beings or from a medical doctor in Norway?
No, from the little grey ones.
Wow. And now let's see what happens when you put the magnet.
Now I'm doing like this, and then I have to do it really hard then to follow to get it off.
And it just the same thing on that side as well.
Yep.
So could it be that there's something on the magnet that's a little sticky, so it's sticking to your skin there? Now put it to another spot. Put it to your forehead. Will it fall off right away or will it stay? Okay, put it to your cheek. Now put it back to your nose. Put it to the other side of your nose.
There.
That's amazing.
It's like you're feeling it, that is.
So you placing that magnet to your face, feel the pull.
Yeah.
Where else are you experiencing the magnet? Now, can you take off your sweatshirt so we don't see any magnetism or anything in your jacket from your zippers?
It's not always that easy to find the bumps. Sometimes it's feeling like they are hiding.
So where else? Now you showed me on the other side of your neck. So far we have both sides of the nose. We have your left side of the neck. And also you said your right side of the neck.
Yeah. I also have some on the back side.
Show me the right side of the neck as well, please. And what are you pressing now? When you put your finger there, what is it you're pressing? What does it feel like to you?
This is the three-cornered shape.
So that has three-corner shape. Have you ever had an X-ray?
I have been taking X-rays sometimes, yes, but never for this.
And for your nose? What about for your nose?
No.
Would it be possible to get a scan of your nose and your neck?
Probably, but I'm not sure if my doctor would say that this is okay to do an X-ray on.
Now, where else do you think you have an implant?
I'm not going to take the strip disc, but here on the back side, here.
How low down?
There have been a lot of bumps here.
And does the magnet stick there?
Yes.
The magnet sticks there?
Yeah.
I'll close my eyes. I won't look.
I shall see if I can find it.
Because you have a...
I need to get away a little bit of fat, because then it won't stick. I don't see.
Yeah, so it's sticking there.
Yeah.
And now if you move it anywhere else, it won't stick.
No.
Right. Wow. So you found for me right now 5 places on camera.
Yeah.
That.
And I have not been looking at my feet or my arms or any other places yet.
Right.
I've just been looking at the places that I've been thinking that maybe.
That's Kate. and as you can see from the video, we have different spots where magnets stick. And in the x-ray she sent me, and it's very hard to see, but there's a little black spot there exactly where the magnets stick. And this black spot, I didn't know how to measure it, but I measured it in pixels on my screen, and it was only 3 to 6 pixels in size, which is kind of small. Now, why I mentioned Kate not being highly educated is because Kate has been receiving downloads about the universe. So much so that she's actually writing a book, and the book is actually completed. Kate was on a morning show in Oslo near where she lives, and she was talking about different things that she's realized about the universe, and she got a call months later from the astrophysicist, head of the Department of Astrophysics, actually, in Oslo University. And he said, I've been trying to track you down, and I'd like to understand, basically, where did you learn this information? And she said, why do you ask? And he said, because it's so forward-thinking, what you're presenting. We're just getting into that now in astrophysics, so I want to know where you got it. And she said to him, you're going to have to read my book. It was tremendously validating to Kate to have that experience and to know that we are connected to the universe in ways that are beyond one's sense of individuality or the vessel that we carry around and say, I. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Here we are in beautiful downtown Toronto, the corner of Ave and Dave, for those of you from Toronto, in Yorkville. And this is my condo rooftop, where you see the blue circle, where I hang out a lot of the time. And the arrow is looking east, which is the direction where some phenomena is that I'm about to talk about. So here's where the discussion about contact and consciousness begins. Something shifted very different for me when I was meditating in my condo one afternoon. And now I've been meditating since I'm a teenager, and had a tremendous amount of instruction from a living guru who could guide my concepts if I was going astray. And why I say this is because I'm used to a certain type of experience, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. But something very different happened on this day, which was outstanding for me, so much so that it's more present to me as an experience than many of the experiences I have every day with fantastic people. So it was remarkable to me. So I had this tremendous sense of acceleration traveling up my spine and through my head and out the top of my head, a kind of Kundalini experience, I guess. Wasn't sleeping at all, but I would liken it to an astral travel experience or an out-of-body experience. Very dramatic, very colorful, very engaging, more so than even my 3D reality. And at one point, I'm flying through space, and I'm looking over my back shoulder. I'm like wearing a t-shirt and jeans. I'm thinking, why am I flying through space in a t-shirt and jeans? So I'm seeing myself as myself, and I'm looking at Earth and saying, oh, there's Earth, and oh, there's the moon, and there's Venus. And as I'm looking over my shoulder, going to the outer edges of our solar system, I'm identifying the little bit I know about the planets out there and realizing that I'm flying into this void. And as I fly into this void of darkness, past a belt of a lot of debris and things like that, suddenly I feel a tension on me, kind of like when you're in a car at a red light and you're sitting there just dazed out and you feel someone looking at you and you suddenly turn and the person in the next car is checking you out, or if you're at a cafe at a table working hard at something, suddenly you look up and there's somebody staring at you. That was the experience I felt, but I couldn't see anything. But this was such a strong, gripping experience that I literally felt like somebody grabbed my head and like shook it, and it's like, look here. And I'm looking and I don't see anything until all of a sudden, right in front of me, this huge face and eyes appear, and it's something I'd never seen in pictures before. Now I know how to identify it, but at the time, I knew nothing about it. I'd never read about it, never heard the word. This is what I saw. It was like a mantis being, I came to learn. I went to a meetup group, in fact, Greg, who's on camera, I think was there at the time back in 2009. And I told the guys my story, and they said, oh yeah, that sounds like a mantis being. I thought, what's a mantis being? This thing was like 20 to 30 feet tall. And the minute my eyes could actually look at it, and before I could even take an inhalation to say, oh my God, you're repulsive or scary or foreign looking to me, before I could even like inhale and think something, I was overwhelmed with wave after wave of thought energy, like a tsunami of love. And it overwhelmed me. And it was such a powerful love that even the love for my guru that I had for him and he had for me didn't compare, or the love of my dear parents who I was extremely attached to didn't feel like this. That's how powerful the love experience was. And then a thought filled my head, only one thought. It was amazing, like all the other stuff that goes on just goes away. And the one thought that filled my head was, we've been together before. And in a state of questioning, I said, in this form, meaning the guy in the t-shirt and jeans? And what came back to me with a strong confidence was, no, like me, meaning the alien being. And it said to me, or the voice I heard in my head was, we've been together before and will be together again. Now, at that point in the experience, we were face to face, or, I mean, it was so big, it's like, couldn't really be face to face, but the head was like the size of my entire body. And we ended up suddenly being side by side and pivoting back towards Earth. And for the first time, we're looking back at Earth, and he says to me, or the voice I'm hearing, you've come to Earth to learn certain lessons, and one day we'll be united again in this form as we once were. And now I'm looking at Earth and I see a movie take place in less than a second of 5,000 years of history, many things significant and seemingly insignificant, but I can see this is a drama from ancient civilizations to where we are today. I'm in there somewhere, and I'm thinking, come to Earth for a few lessons. This feels like it's thousands of years. So time is relative. I understood that incarnating into a form was like school for the soul, and that the soul takes on many shapes and forms for its own growth and evolution. Regardless of the I that I assume in this body, when I was with the mantis being, it was like the central core upon which all these other incarnations were like superimpositions upon my essence. The body, as it became obvious to me, is a container for the soul consciousness to live and experience knowledge of form and formless being as one. We are physical containers for a more subtle consciousness and dimension that is infinitely widespread. So the question to myself after this was, because this happened on another level, not three-dimensional, not tangible that I could reach out and touch, is it any less valid than if I were to have the experience in my kitchen while cooking dinner? So we tend to doubt something that's not 3D, but when consciousness alone is, like I learned in India, then I thought, why not? And even for someone who meditated for so many years, it's hard to break this 3D attachment as being real and everything else being questionable. But I'm learning more and more each day that it's important to question. So we're back to my downtown rooftop. This time it's 2015. And what you're seeing is a slow shutter speed and a plane flying northwest, I guess. And the other angle is probably to the east. And this is sort of my vision from on top. The green light is one of those illegal laser pointers. And the circled area is the Pleiades star system. And the arrow going on top that looks like the Amazon logo is the trajectory of a craft that I'm going to talk about right now. On August 3rd in 2015, I'm on my rooftop with Allison, who's here. Allison, you want to stand up and wave to people? Admit to the sighting. So we're on my rooftop. It's very late at night, and of course I don't have a camera, phone, or anything, but I do have my laser pointer, so go figure that one out. And at a certain point I say to Allison, do you see what I see? And she says, it's tumbling. And I say, no, tumbling implies that it's falling, it's twirling. It was a cylinder-shaped object going top over bottom, very slowly in a rotation, and it was encapsulated within amber light, and then it turned to a green light, kind of like the aurora borealis color of green. So anyone out there working on zero-point technology projects, we could expect a colorful display surrounding it in terms of what it puts out, is my guess. Now, Allison at one point said to me, is that a satellite? Because proportionately, it actually looked like that proportion without all the wingy stuff, and it wasn't shiny. It was very matte, dark color, but it also was late at night. But you could see when the laser was hitting it, that it was hitting something right over top of the condo. Now, where I live, there's a flight path that comes in one way coming here to Mississauga where the planes land, and on the other side they go out, and there's a lot of space in between. Nothing flies overhead except occasionally the space station, which you can see is just a dot of light. This was something else, and I've worked, in the world of television, I work with drones a lot, and I could tell you that was not a drone. And the aura again looks a lot like this. So I thought, wow, that's really cool. We were all excited, didn't know what to make of it other than, wow, had a sighting. The next week, I'm at a lecture at the University of Toronto featuring Nassim Haramein, who I'm sure many of you know. And afterwards, there was a party, and Nassim was there, Alex Gray and his wife Allison were there, and other people who we all know from this space. And this is the scene of the party, which requires a lot of explanation. I'll get into the details of it later, but in the far background, you see people toasting with glasses in their hand. That's me in the chair, by the way, sitting by the table. There's a shaman guy who showed up at one point during the experience, and then there's some mantis bug-like creatures, I don't know what they were. At a certain point, they show up too and block the shaman, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm at the party, and I'm talking to a gentleman who I've wanted to meet for a year, who I thought would be instrumental in projects that I wanted to work on. I'm finally sitting with him, and then suddenly I'm feeling as if somebody put chili pepper in my veins, and there was this fire experience traveling all throughout my arms, my legs, my chest, my head, everywhere. It wasn't like heat, as if, hey, I'm really hot now. It was literally like a burning chili pepper experience. And I thought, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? I'm too young for that. What's going on? So I leave the outside deck area and I go into the party room and sit in the far corner on a chair, that chair, and I close my eyes and I'm doing my yogic breathing and everything I learned in India to try and slow down my metabolism and just watch what's going on, because it was quite frankly very overwhelming for me. I close my eyes, I'm doing my breathing, 6 hours pass. I don't get up, I don't go anywhere, not to the bathroom, I don't respond to any of the people who are shaking my shoulder and saying, Sid, what's going on, what's going on? I heard everybody, and I knew exactly who was there, but I was so deep somewhere I could not come out to engage, and this is what I saw. During the entire 6 hours, I was watching something for the most part, not these guys, they came in a little bit later. I was watching as if, you know when cells divide and multiply? I was watching that for 6 hours. And I believed it was going on inside my chest. I couldn't see the outside of my chest, but it was going on inside my chest. And it was a muddy red color. At a certain point, I felt like I opened my eyes, at least my inner eyes, and these three, I don't know how to describe them. They're sort of like grays as we typically know them, but they were also muddy brownish red. And over my head, they're touching something here. They weren't actually touching it. It was literally levitating. I was very aware of something levitating over my head that looked like it was brass or copper or golden in some way. And it was suggested to me by somebody who said they've seen them before on certain projects that are hidden, that it was a consciousness-assisted technology made of brass and gold to elevate one's consciousness and heal spiritually and physically for 6 hours. And so, at a certain point, usually I'm very engaging and have tons of questions and interact. Nothing's going on in my head. But at a certain point I say, what am I doing here? And what I heard back was, we would have never known about you had you not aggressively attacked us. And then I thought, aggressively attacked us? What are you talking about? Then they played the image from my rooftop of the laser beam hitting the side of the craft. Now, as a director, I'm always thinking angles, light, and where things are. My angle was looking up my arm to the craft and following the light beam straight, pretty much like what you see in this image where I'm pointing at Saturn, I believe. They play back the image in my head of a real close-up where the light is impacting the side of the craft. That, for me, was a serious aha moment, because now I could combine a three-dimensional experience with an other dimensional experience and realize that it's not imagination, it's not dream, it's not drugs, it is a consciousness-shifting experience. So back at the party, at one point, once I understand that it was my aggressive attack to them, and they were right. I wasn't sort of saying, I want to make contact, I'm your brother from Earth, from another mother. I was zapping it like I was a kid, like bang, 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 you're dead type of thing. I had no expansion at all. I was reverted back to childhood. So a shaman comes and sits beside me at one point, because I didn't know, but my eyes were fluttering back in my head, is what Nassim Harmein told me the other day when we were talking about it. And I said, well, did you think to call an ambulance? You thought I was having a seizure? He says, well, everyone said you're a meditator, so we left you alone. So I was like, that's weird. So we're at the party, and the shaman suddenly comes and sits beside me, because people were concerned in what's going on. And he has this fake English accent. And he's saying, well, Sid's experiencing this, and Sid's experiencing... And like, bro, that's not a real accent, is what I'm hearing in my head. And secondly, it's like, that's nothing like I was experiencing at all. So it was kind of mind-blowing. And suddenly, these reptilian kind of creatures came between him and me, and they were blocking him. And I'm sitting there in the middle, and it's kind of like I feel like the scales of balance. Like, so is he the one I should listen to, or let the guys continue operating on me, whatever they're doing? And it's like, he's a bullshitter, we're going to the aliens. So they continued doing whatever they were doing, and then at the 6-hour point, somebody taps me on the shoulder to say, Sid, the party room's about to be locked up, you'll be here for the night if you don't get up now. And for the first time, I was able to get up and leave. This is Allison, by the way, who stood up and took a bow a moment before. And Allison's very instrumental in all my experiences. I've probably had 20-something sightings over the years, and I would say pretty much all of them but one or two happened around her. So I think there's a phenomena that I will speak about concerning that, but I believe Allison has the ability to attract phenomena because she has a life of nothing but phenomena going on since a very young age, and I don't, so unless I hang out with people like that. So at one point, Allison says, we're sitting in the living room, she said, Sid, when you're alone, and you close your eyes and you're quiet, what do you hear when you close your eyes? And I describe what I see and hear. I stand there and I say, well, sometimes I hear the conversations of the day, a lot of times I hear music, and other times I hear nothing at all. What do you hear? And Allison replied that she hears what sounds like a big truck revving its engines right outside her bedroom window in the driveway. And I'm thinking, okay, and do you hear this on any side of your head in particular? And she said the left side of the head. Then bells and whistles went off for me because, as many of you might know, in the implant phenomenon, I would say maybe 80 to 90% of the time, implants are found on the left side of the body. So I pulled out my trusty magnets, started feeling around the back of her head, and lo and behold, there was one spot where magnets stick. You could move it a couple of millimeters any direction, and they would fall. But in that spot, it actually stuck, which is interesting. As this poster says, you are here, and I believe that this statement, you are here, will prove to be outdated science one day very soon. But what I learned from NASA, so I'm in a phone conversation with the assistant director of NASA, and one of my questions before we got off the phone is, hey, listen, I know a lot of people who claim to be in the secret space program. Is there a secret space program? To which the answer was, yeah, of course there is, Sid. In fact, the person who runs the program is down the hall from me. I even learned the name of that person, but I'm so name lexic that without writing it down, it's like goes in one ear and out the other. But it was a very important confirmation that was so shocking to me that I didn't even ask the obvious question, what's the secret? So we met for lunch. We had a 2-hour lunch together, and I said, so what's the secret part that's called secret space program? And she said, Sid, it's obvious. It's just military, right? So there's a military aspect, and they're doing things that are very advanced. In fact, NASA gets a lot of their hand-me-downs. Technology that's 5 years old, 10 years old. She went as high as saying 30-year-old technology. I mean, look at your computer. 30 years from now, it'll be worth more on eBay than it is today. So I said, can you tell me one thing that gives us a hint as to what the secret space program is about without compromising national security? She said, well, in fact, they're working on a telescope right now, building a telescope that allows them to look into alternative universes. And I said, alternative universes? Look, if you're going to build something, you have to have a tangible, knowing that it's going to meet specific requirements to be able to do what you want to do. If you want to get in a car and drive somewhere, you have to build the car very specifically to get you from A to B. So I said, if you're building a telescope to look into alternative universes, how does that work? Because back in the day when I was in school, there was one universe, and it was infinite, like infinite in all directions. How do we have multiple infinites? She said, very simple. She said, if you took a whole stack of papers and started leaning them against each other, that very, very fine space where they're touching, we call jello. She said, how long is your nose? And I thought that was a trick question, so I was silent. And she said, in fact, it's about 9 centimeters. Now, when I estimate, I say 10, but she was estimating at 9, so she knows what she's talking about, is my guess. And she said those 9 centimeters space is like the paper. She said that's where the next universe intersects with us. 9 centimeters of space before the next universe begins. She said, how long is your nose? Being an example of 9 centimeters. So now, if you look at my profile, I'm walking through lots of universes now. So I said, is it possible then that as I extend my arm through this, across the table and touch the side of your arm, that I'm traversing multiple universes? She said, yes. I said, is it possible that there's another conversation that you and I are having, but the dynamic is very different in another universe? She said, yes. And that was mind-blowing to me because and then I said to her, is it possible that in my peripheral vision, sometimes I think I see a shadow of somebody or a form of something, and then I look and it's gone, and I dismiss it. I said, is it possible I'm intersecting with another being from another universe? She said, yes. I realized from that everything is our own filter that we project on things, whether you call it a ghost or an ET or whatever. We are in different resonances with different energies and beings, and it's all going on beyond what we conceive. And that brings me to here, which is consciousness, the common thread. That's the Valley of Gods, where I studied a lot of this as a young person. And my kind of mantra, no matter what's going on, when phenomena is presented to me, I just stop for a second and I kind of say, where is there where consciousness is not? And as fundamental and basic as the source for all creation, in fact, source and manifestation are one and the same. And I kind of think of it as a canvas of light that we see a beautiful scene of the mountains, the Himalayas, and everyone will talk, oh, there's a mountain and it's this color and it's early morning and it's a river. We're always identifying the form, whereas I've learned to celebrate it's the canvas that's important, because the canvas is throughout it all. The power of experiencing things through our five senses and really keeping it on a three-dimensional level is a fundamental mistake in our thinking, and we have to expand beyond that. And it's kind of like looking up to the sky and thinking, is this the entire universe? No, it's not. So meditation opens dimensions to infinite possibilities, and this is where we come to Eric von Daniken again, who wrote the book Chariots of the Gods. Eric was a huge influence on me, as I said when I began, and opening up infinite possibilities through that book has actually made full circle in a sense, because I was asked to create 40-something, almost 50 episodes of Eric von Daniken's work legacy in English and German. And I'm proud to say that as the director and producer of that, to celebrate his 50-year anniversary, that was the book that started me off in being interested in all this. And that is the culmination of my life's work and study to be able to have created such a body of work for him. And so, back to the original question, are we alone? What I'll say to that is, we are it all. Life in the form, life free of the form, the varieties of life are everywhere, because consciousness alone is. Thank you very much.
I think we have a few minutes for some questions, so I'll, I know there might be a lot out there. Okay, let's start with here and there.
The round gold disc. The round gold disc that you were describing, what did you really believe that was?
In the cylinder that was passing overhead, I believe it was an energy field which allowed it to move, because there were no wings, no propulsion, no jets, no fossil fuels involved. So I suspect it was a field around the object that allowed it to move whichever way it wanted to move.
Here's a question here.
I didn't understand the thing about the laser beam and the craft. I thought you weren't using that laser beam, were you? Was it just passing through your building?
I had a handheld laser that's for, looking at the stars and pointing to things. That's the only thing I had. I didn't have my phone, I didn't have a camera. But when I saw it coming overhead and I knew it wasn't a plane, I thought, let me see what happens. And rather than, point as a director to it, I want to actually hit it and see what happened. So I used the green laser and I hit the side of the craft that was rotating top over bottom. So I was convinced this thing is real, whatever it is, and it's not a drone that I would use to shoot a TV show.
Here's a question over here.
Getting back to the implants, and they're saying there's nothing metallic in it, and it's bone chip or skin or what have you. Why was it then that the blades were breaking when you're trying to sever this thing?
That's why
Where's
I got
the
really
explanation to that?
Yeah, that's why I got really excited, because the blade was made to cut metals, and you would think it would slice through a bone chip like a knife to butter. Of course, there are trace minerals in there, like there are trace minerals in all our blood and everything. There was no explanation for it. The doctor himself, who uses that machine daily, he actually said at one point, he says, "This is really weird. I'm getting excited now. You might have something." And what we have is an anomaly.
Another question over here.
Sorry, back to the laser. I'm over here. When you pointed the laser at it, did it reflect some light back off? Like, could you actually see the laser hitting the object?
Yes, I could actually see the contact point where my laser was hitting the side of the object. It looked to me like it was matte gray material.
So it wasn't a clear thing.
It was
that
not
went through it,
shiny or
reflected light
reflective.
back off of it. It was a hard surface.
Yes, it was just a contact point, and I could identify something, but I couldn't say what that something was.
Hi. When you spoke with the NASA assistant director about multi-dimension, did you also ask him about the insectoid aliens or other aliens that they might have encountered? maybe from the office down, from the secret offices?
I missed the first part of your question, so
When you were sitting and discussing the multi-dimension with the NASA assistant director,
Right.
did you also inquire about different kinds of aliens?
We talked about that a little bit, and she was very quick to say, Sid, and she would quote places of the Bhagavad Gita to me where it talks about Krishna and multi-conscious experience. She said, I would be the first one to be on the radio and television saying that we've had contact. She said, look, we're going to announce at some point soon that when our Cassini spacecraft went through the plume over one of the moons of Jupiter, that, yeah, there's microbes and everything, but in terms of intelligent life, Sid, I don't think so. So I said, well, why are you holding back on the microbes? And if they're microbes, then there's going to be bigger microbes until we call them a being at some point. But she definitely drew the line.
We have a friend who had a metallic thing in his ear, and we felt it. And then he said it was removed. And he said he was told that they had to remove it now. And he also had different experiences where he woke up, he was due for an important heart operation, he got sick leave, and in the middle of the night, he woke up and there were like beings with reptile-looking skin, 4 fingers, I believe.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say reptilian type of skin, because at one point when I was on my back in that experience, I did feel like I reached out to touch its arm at one point. It was very skinny, it was cold to the touch, and it had some kind of texture on it that I would have likened to a snake or something like that. That was my thought. And those were my only 2 experiences, like, what am I doing here? And wow, I aggressively attacked you, and the touch of the skin. In 6 hours, my only 2 thoughts.
Question here.
Since you were visited by the aliens, did you find any magnetic areas in your body?
I'm boring.
I was left with some suspense with your story. Did you end up apologizing to the aliens for hitting them with the laser?
Sorry, say that again?
Did you end up apologizing to the reddish sort of gray aliens because you hit them with the laser, or did you what happened after that?
I was very non-conversant, other than what am I doing here and reaching out and touching the skin. Those are my only 2 conscious thoughts for 6 hours, other than watching the cells multiply in what seemed to be my chest and looking at them thinking what the F's going on here? But no, I didn't do anything that I would do in a normal conscious conversation at all. But in front of everyone, I would like to apologize now if I offended them. Let it go on record. I really didn't want to be so unconscious.
3 more questions, okay?
Do you have any explanation as to why they have these implants? Are they controlling people with that or get information?
That's a great question, and it's something that I've had various thoughts about over the years and never the same. At one time, I used to think it was a kind of antenna for them to connect to us, but trust me, they don't need antennas. So I can't say with conviction what it is, but I have a sense about it that it is a frequency affecting device that helps us to be at a certain frequency to enable their consistent interactions with us.
Hi, Sid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he asked if I had contact with Dr. Roger Lear and if I've ever seen any of the implants that he's removed. And I've had a lot of contact with Dr. Lear. He mentored me prior to my own experience of going out and conducting the surgery, helped me to find what we're looking for, and he very shortly afterwards passed away. And I did not see any of his implants at all.
Thank you very much, Sid. We've reached 12 o'clock.
Thank you, everybody, and I'll be sitting outside.
Here for Sid.